Good evening, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Jodi Hammer, and I am the Career Services Specialist for NPCA's Global Reentry Program. And I'm thrilled to be with you here tonight talking about the tips for getting through a lengthy and challenging job search. I know it's not easy to be, out there and just pounding away and really trying and, not getting that job yet. And so this is really designed to help you with some things that you might do that might help ease that transition from unemployed or employed in something you're wanting to move away from into moving into the job that you want. Okay. So let's go ahead and start. So my question here is, how are you feeling with your job search? Are you feeling exhausted? Are you feeling defeated or pessimistic? Are you feeling stuck, like you're in a rut and you can't really get out of it and you're not hearing back from people and it's just very frustrating? If that explains you, if that describes you, chances are you are suffering from job search fatigue, which is no wonder in this day and age when we're sending out massive amounts, oftentimes of applications and such, all online. So you're kind of isolated and you're just like, you're not interacting with people. You're just sending in these jobs that, you hear about online oftentimes. And that's really easy to get into a state of feeling, gosh, is it ever going to end? Am I ever going to get that job that I want? So one of the things that I wanted to start with tonight is just to see what your biggest pain point is in the job search. And feel free to put this in the chat box. We can certainly chat about various ones. But what is your biggest pain point in your own job search? Is it that you're not getting any response? You're sending in resumes and cover letters and you're not getting any response? Or are you getting to or through the interview feeling good about it and then you don't get chosen, or anything else in between? So I'd love to hear what you have to say in that regard. Okay, I know many people, the stress of just doing the job search and not hearing back is really frustrating. So for many of my clients, that's really what they report is, I put out all these applications, I'm putting my best foot forward. I think I'm doing a good job on the resume, all of that. I'm spending a lot of time on it and each one, sending them out and then just not hearing anything. And that's a real blow. I mean, couldn't they at least tell me thanks, but no thanks? And, our society, I mean, the way that things are structured, oftentimes it's, unless you hear from us, like we'll contact, they might even say in an application, in a vacancy announcement, basically to the extent of don't call us, we'll call you if interested. They may not use those exact words, but that's basically the tone of what it is. We'll reach out to candidates we're interested in. Thanks for your interest. And I guess that's their way of not having to do the, thank you for applying, we've chosen another candidate, and that whole thing where, it just makes it, I guess, easier for them. But it can be really deflating, I think, to your self-esteem, right? And what, how your job search is going, really, right? Another pain point here is, let's say you have, you're just not meeting people. You're not, you're feeling lonely. You're feeling like you're not even, and you want to get out there, but with, even the end of COVID, it seems like everything's still virtual, whether it's virtual career fairs or, virtual meetings one-on-one for career chats, things like that. Maybe that's hard for you. And so there's some things that, maybe we can talk about in this session as well that would meet that. Or, you're getting through, you're passing the screening and you're being referred on. Maybe then you're just not getting the interview, but you were found to be one of the more qualified candidates. Or you get the interview and you think it goes pretty well, and then there's just nothing afterwards. And so I'm going to share some tips and techniques for those kinds of scenarios and what you can do to actually increase the likelihood maybe of a couple things you can do to maybe even increase the likelihood of being moved forward in the process. So let's go ahead and get started here. All right. So sometimes people feel desperate, right? I mean, that's a very common feeling, right? After you've, been doing a job search for some time and nothing's coming through, you start to question, right? Second guess yourself and feel like, gosh, maybe I don't have the skills I thought I had. Like nobody wants me. What am I going to do? And then you can kind of it's that whole like one step after the other. And it's like, what if nobody wants me? I won't be able to pay my rent. I won't be able to stay here in DC. And you just end up inflating it and becoming really feeling desperate. And then it gets to the point of anxiety and sometimes even depression, which is common within the job search, right? So I think job search fatigue that's left unaddressed can very often lead to a real depression, and it can be simultaneous with it as well, right? So we'll talk about some of the things that maybe you can do. So I want to reassure you, though, as we're moving forward, that it is not a lost cause. You are not a lost cause. You are very competent and capable. You are an RPCV, and I will tell you from 14 years of experience working directly supporting returned Peace Corps volunteers, first at Peace Corps headquarters running their career center, and now with NPCA's Global Reentry Program. I have worked with thousands and thousands of RPCVs, return volunteers, and I've counseled them on, on their job search, and you definitely have many skills that are so well utilized in whatever job you're going into. So a lot of times it just comes with, how can I maybe reevaluate how I'm going about my job search to establish maybe healthier boundaries or more balance and more of a feeling of, okay, instead of, that high anxiety that so many feel all the time. So let's move into this and see. First, I think it's understanding, that the job search fatigue is real. It is a condition. It is a medical, right, condition. And, fatigue in general, there's different causes for it, but job search fatigue is, that feeling exhausted, feeling, just, at wit's end, if you will, like nothing's working out. You get pessimistic, and it's just feeling like you're not able to make, move forward in the job search. And it is real, and it is also treatable and or preventable. So I'm going to share some tips on that as well to hopefully help you maybe get out of that funk if you feel like you are in that. But mental stress is what's really involved with, with job search fatigue, right? And the mental stress leads to the fatigue, the job search fatigue, right? You might end up spending so much time on things and not taking any breaks. And then you get exhausted and you're not sleeping as well. You're waking up in the night, you're thinking about the job search, where you're not getting a decent amount of sleep. All of those things are signs that that job search fatigue is present, and it's important to address. Absolutely. So one of the first things that I say to people when they explain, gosh, my job search isn't going well, it's really frustrating, I'm just spending 8 hours a day, or I'm doing 10 resumes a day, and I'm just so frustrated. And my first, reaction is step away from the job search, from the screen altogether. So, some people love to watch like movies online as well, but step away from that screen and just do something with your hands completely unrelated to your job search, right? Just something that you're making or you're doing, so that you're doing something that kind of, it helps to restore your sense of, feeling like you're capable and you can do some things, right? I mean, it could be something like a friendship bracelet or something for a child, or some little drawing that you do, maybe you like. Just make something if possible, or get out and maybe you like to draw, and you could draw something, or just anything that's not your job search and is not just sitting in front of a screen and watching the screen. So just to get that perspective, you need to get away from it to have a healthy perspective is the first thing, right? But there's many other things that we're going to talk about, and we'll go forward with that as well. I talk about it as being, rebounding from job search fatigue. So you are feeling that way. And, the first tip that I give to people is to limit the amount of hours you're spending on your job search. So I would counsel you not to spend more than probably 5 hours max a day on a job search. Because when you spend 10 hours a day and you're doing it, let me tell you, your mind is getting tired. It's getting stressed. You're getting, just it's anxiety provoking, right? Producing. And then sometimes then you might make mistakes on your, resumes, whatever, or you just might not put your best foot forward. I would rather have you do less applications and spend more time, open time in the day, if possible, doing something else. um and sometimes people will say, well, I'm only 1 month away from, I mean, unless you're someone who's 1 month away from like losing your, your house or your, apartment, all of that, but in that case, I would say if you are in that desperate position, you probably need to look at a bridge job. And a bridge job it's a temporary job. It could be completely unrelated to what you're looking to do, but it pays the bills and takes that stress off of you of, I'm going to lose my, apartment in a month if I don't have something lined up, because that's just not a very healthy place to come from, right? So, and don't, and I would say about bridge jobs, please don't feel like, oh, I'm doing this. This is going to make me look desperate, and that I'm, it's whatever, whatever it is, and it could be something like maybe you love animals, maybe you start walking dogs, some for for a business, and or for somebody else who has a business, things like that, right? It's not something that may necessarily even go on your resume, right? But it's something that gives you that paycheck that is going to at least help, reduce that job search fatigue and that stress and that anxiety. Okay. And allow you to wait a little longer for, that job that you really are looking for, right? So I've seen stats as low as like 3 hours a day. Some people say do 3 hours. I would say 3 to 5, max 5. So that you do still have, time to take care of yourself, time to get out, from your little computer where you're, just working on all of this, right? Get out in the world, interact with people, right? All of those kinds of things. So that, I think that's really, really important. And then another tip is rewarding yourself daily, little rewards, right? Maybe it's, you love a certain podcast. And so when you get that job that you're, that application out, and you feel, you worked really hard on it, you step away, right? And you go listen to that podcast, maybe while you're walking outside, or, getting some exercise. Exercise, of course, is very important as well, right? Just as it is for depression. Getting out, moving about can have major impacts, positive impacts on your mood, on your perspective, right? Whether you're, pessimistic or optimistic, that kind of thing. So so rewarding yourself, I think, per day is great. Little rewards, right? I mean, they're not huge rewards. I'm going to go to New Orleans for the weekend. I mean, that's, not necessarily a reward that would work in for most people anyway. But also, taking mini breaks when you are in doing the job search, but really like setting up a schedule, right? So if you have, let's say, a 4-hour day, maybe you're doing like 8 to 12 or 9 to 9 to 1 or whatnot. Research shows that you're most productive generally if you get up, you get ready, and you start in the morning instead of like 1 to 5, right? So so getting up, and that includes getting showered, getting dressed. I know very well from my own experience, we can certainly be in pajama bottoms or pajamas or whatever all day some days, right? And still do all of our work that we need to. But does that help you as a job seeker feel, confident? Probably not as much. So when you kind of dress the part, I'm not saying you need to wear a suit, clearly not, but just getting dressed and put together, right? Taking a shower, that really helps your frame of mind as well. So doing that can really help you kind of get out of that funk too. The next one is really not isolating, right? So staying connected, with both your friends and your family, so your immediate network that you already have, as well as expanding that, right, is important, which we'll talk about later on. But in addition, just finding support, right? People, and as an RPCV, as a returned Peace Corps volunteer, right, you have not only your primary, right, support system, but there are so many support groups and systems that are, part of the Peace Corps family, right? Our affiliate groups that we have our affiliate group network has, there's so many different, whether it's a country of service group, you could reconnect with your country of service group. I served in Ecuador, so getting involved with the Friends of Ecuador group, or your region. If you're living in the DC metro area, maybe that's the Return Peace Corps Volunteers of DC, or it could be, NOVA, the Northern California, right? The Northern California group or the Southern California group. There's many different, regional ones as well. And then there are all the ones that are like, that are, based around specific passion areas, or, if you're really interested in, gender and gender equality and women's things, you might join the Women of Peace Corps Legacy, which is a great affiliate group, right? Or maybe you're into the environment. There's, the RPCVs for Environmental Action, another great active group, and they, they're awesome, but they're also made of RPCVs who totally understand what you're going through, right? With your job search, they've been there, right? Chances are they might have those suggestions or people you could talk with in your own, area of interest. So all of those kinds of are opportunities, right? They're opportunities for connection, just period, but then connection to potential people who might know about job opportunities in whatever field you're pursuing. So I would really encourage you to do those kinds of things as well, right? And as well as, each week you want to, I say as well, you, and many people will, agree with this. There's lots of resources out there you can refer to, but taking time to do something for yourself, right? So maybe I oftentimes recommend volunteering, and this is why. When you're out of if you're not working, and you're kind of, down on the job search and all of that, it's just, it's really frustrating. You do what you need to, still making it productive and having that schedule that's very, set, where you do that and you do whatever, your applications and all of that. But then maybe once a week, you volunteer at, a women's, shelter, or a gender equality organization that's working in that area, or maybe it's an environmental group, right? There's lots of different things that you can get involved in and do. So doing volunteer work in your area of passion is fabulous for multiple reasons. It allows you to connect with others who share that passion area. It allows them to see you and get to know you as somebody who's working with them, who's supporting their causes, who's, doing the volunteer kinds of, work opportunities. So that brings you into their network. So then they might be able to connect you with other people, or chances are when an organization has a job that comes available, who do they look to first? Typically they look to their internal staff, right? And that includes volunteers, right? Or maybe a job comes available in that organization and they're like, hey, Susan, you'd be great for this. Why don't you apply? Like, it's all because you were volunteering. You weren't necessarily expecting a job out of it, but sometimes that happens. So doing things like that to really get involved. And the other thing is, when you're volunteering in your passion area, you're showing up in your area that really like feeds your soul. And that soul experience of feeling like you're doing something you're committed to has incredible, ramifications, positive ramifications, right, on your other aspects. Like when you're doing your job search, if you're feeling good about what you're doing and you're volunteering at, it's going to help you have a better, more positive, perspective that you bring to the job search, which is really great. And then, I already really covered this one, the getting dressed, right? At least definitely get dressed, right? If not showering, right? But and then also practice, that positive self-talk, because a lot of times it's really easy to get down on ourselves, especially in the job search, because if you're not hearing back, your self-talk is like, well, I guess I'm screwing up the application. I guess I don't have the skills that they feel are needed. I'm not skilled. It's like negative, right? So you've got to really counter that, right? with, with some of that positive self, like, if there's a negative message that you're having, like writing that down, but then thinking of, okay, this is not true. I have shown my XYZ skills in, when I was working as a Peace Corps volunteer, I used this, and this, and I'm resourceful, and, those kinds of things that you can plug about yourself, right? You can look online too, of course, on, practicing positive self-talk. It's really a way of being more compassionate with ourselves. And I will say return volunteers tend to be much more compassionate with others than they are to themselves. So we tend to be hard on ourselves in many ways. And so really, trying to really practice that kind of positive self-talk is really, I think, very helpful. And then taking a break. And when I say here, this is different than the one that I said at the top of the list. What I mean here is take a couple days off, or, I mean, if you can do it longer, right? But even if it's, if you feel like, oh, I can't take a vacation, I don't have any money, I can't, whatever, just taking a break from the job search is not always a bad deal. A lot of people think, oh, if I take time off, it's just going to lengthen the job search, but it's actually the opposite oftentimes, because when you take that time off and you completely disconnect from the job search, and as much as you can from the mental, what am I going to do? Focusing on something else, focusing on something that you love, that you want to do, that whatever, it allows you that space to kind of regroup. And then when you come back, you can be more effective. And I'm going to tell you right here. So you step away, like I'm showing here, it helps you get kind of clear your vision, right? And then after you return, from that break that might be a few days long, or some people will do it during the break, but I honestly recommend that you spend the bulk of that break just completely detached, right? That's really healthy for you when you're really in that whole, downward spiral, with the job search and such, and it'll help you to do that. So when you come back, not starting over, but start by reassessing, what your goals and your vision for your new job is. What are the wants and needs? Because what sometimes happens is, as we begin to feel more desperate and we're doing the job search, sometimes those we start to apply for jobs that aren't really exactly what we're looking for, and then that takes us further and further. I mean, it's fine to open your scope, and that's good. You might need to do that, right? But when you do it too much and you're suddenly spending all this time on these jobs that don't meet your needs. What I say is really look at, okay, what are my needs? I must have a job that has good health insurance, that has, what are those? Whatever that criteria, the must-haves are, keep those at the top of your, list, if you will. Have a sticky where you are doing your job search. So it's really right there in front of you, right? Because that's key. You don't want to spend time applying for a job and then be like, oh, well, it doesn't have the health insurance, and turn it down, right? If you do get that, you want to be productive and spend your time applying for jobs that you really, that you are interested in, or are a foot in the door. Oftentimes, if you're trying to get into an industry such as, let's say, international development, a lot of people want to work in international development, right? A lot of Peace Corps volunteers. So, you might not walk right into a program manager type of position, right? You might come in as an associate, and then senior associate, and then there's, you're promoted up. So, by talking to people and learning more about, okay, how does this organization, what are their, criteria? What do you usually come in with my kind of background? Is it the associate level and then this? So you get more information, so you know where you should be targeting your job search, right? Where should you be putting the bulk of your energies, right? So that is really important. And then, are you applying for the jobs, right, that meet that criteria? And then, then think as well, where is my job search going awry? Like, where am I getting stuck? We talked about that a little bit right in the beginning, right? Is it the black hole of, the resumes? They collect the resumes and there's just no, there's no feedback whatsoever, right? Or as I said earlier, maybe you're getting the, you're getting the interviews, but it's you're not getting beyond that. So in those kinds of situations, you can learn a lot from that too. For example, if you're experiencing the black hole where you're just not getting a lot of feedback on any of your stuff that you're sending in, right? It might be your resume. Maybe you're trying to cram too much stuff into your resume and it's just not very readable. Maybe you would benefit from having a resume that's a little less packed, right? And that's an option, right? Or maybe you're not using the kind of resume that this industry really promotes, or this company promotes. And that's where, when you do those career chats and you talk with people from the industry, from the organization, you can get more insight into what kind of a resume do they prefer. Is it a standard reverse chronological with your most recent job experience, first and going backwards? Is it a functional? Not a lot of organizations use functional ones, but it can be good when you're trying to change careers drastically, where you're focusing on what your skill set is, and then you have the work experience categories with different bullets under them proving each of these categories. And then at the end you have work history, and it just has your organization's name, location, job title, and dates. No description, because theoretically you're putting those descriptions up front. So that's more of the functional one. But most are looking at either your skills-based type of resume, your reverse chronological is the standard. Federal, very different. Maybe maybe part of your frustration is you've been focusing on the federal jobs and you're not realizing that by submitting a resume that's your own copy of a resume, not the USA Jobs version, or at least not modifying your own version to include every aspect that's essential, right? For example, you need to have your dates, typically your salary, although they're kind of doing away with that. But if they ask for it as a required one, you want to definitely, include that. Your supervisor's name, their contact information, and whether it's okay to contact them. Those are all things that have to be on that generally have to be on a federal resume. So, if you're doing a, USA Jobs one, there's no problem. It's going to all be there because you have to fill out the stuff that's required, right? And it's this form template. But I understand it's not so pretty to look at, although the, HR folks like it because they can just scan it. They know exactly where to find everything. But I'm not a big fan of the USA Jobs build your own resume there. I'd prefer to have one of my own, but making sure that maybe you're including that stuff, because if you're not, you're going to be getting the standard DQ, disqualified. You've been found not to meet the qualifications, when you're like, of course I met them. I exceeded them. This is my experience. Well, no, they're not going to say, oh, you didn't provide dates for this date to that date. They don't have, so they say, right. I mean, they don't have time for that. This is the, federal government. There's thousands of people, applying all of that. But, so it could be some issues with that you're not maybe, getting from that. And so I'm happy to, of course, talk with any of you on, any RPCV on their job search and, federal resume tips and things like that. I have a background in that as well. So thinking about the kinds of, resume, but if it's that you're not getting if it's that you're getting the interviews and you're not getting the job afterwards, that means you made it. Your resume was okay. You made it through the resume screening where they said, these are the top candidates that we're going to interview. So you're one of the top candidates, one of the best if you're getting an interview. So try to take that and be like, okay, I got an interview. This is great. And this is amazing and whatever. Even if you don't get that job, it's, and I know it's hard when you don't, but this is one of the tips that I give, and I'm just going to give it now. If you have interviewed for a job and then you find out afterwards that you didn't get it, one of the things that you can do, I recommend, if they say, thanks, but no thanks, right? I recommend replying to them in an email and saying something like, thank you so much for letting me know regarding your selection decision for the program manager position. While disappointed to have not been selected, I wish you the very best with your chosen candidate. Should you have future opportunities that arise, please reach out to me, as I remain deeply committed to XYZ, right? So by doing that, you set yourself apart from the vast majority of people. Most people don't do that, right? But it also allows them, you're one of the top candidates, remember. Maybe their first candidate doesn't come through for whatever reason. Maybe their background check didn't come through. Maybe they changed their mind for whatever reason. If that first candidate doesn't doesn't come through, guess who they're going to be looking at? Wow, you were so professional. You sent us a thank you note after rejection. Like, that's impressive. So it's things like that. These are little things that you can like do to really make, I think, a change in your, in your job search process. So, and then of course, reassessing your application materials, right? Like I said, with your resume, it might be using a different style. It might be making it more, simple. It might be tailoring it sometimes. And I'm not saying this is anyone in particular, but sometimes RPCVs get so tired in the job search that they're like, they just use a standard one and they just, like change the name on the cover letter, and they, change the name of the company, or so they think. And sometimes that gets left, and that's not a good impression at all. But likewise, using a standard resume and not tailoring it, I am not a fan of that. I would much rather see you do less resumes and cover letters and applications per day, in your schedule, than pumping out like a factory, just these untailored ones, because they can tell when they're not. And they're not going to sift to the top generally, and they're not going to get where you want to go. So you waste all this time doing, kind of this job that, this work that's not going to be rewarded, right? So think about that as well, I would say. And then, I do want to talk, and again, if you have any questions, certainly dump them in the chat box there. I want to chat briefly about how to handle the radio silence, right? When you just don't hear anything, right? Oftentimes, there's that saying, right? No news is good news. But in this sense, with a job search, no news is not good news, right? You want to hear. And so when you have that, of course, it's common, right? And it's kind of lack of closure, right? You don't feel like it's complete. It's like, well, I don't think I got it. I mean, it's been 2 months now, but they haven't told me. So I don't know. Maybe I'm still in the running. You can't completely move on, right? So that does kind of, impact your own sense of, feeling rejected, right? And so you can certainly call, and I do say to people, reach out, try to call. But a lot of times, even when people do, they may not get, any answer. And that's true, but you might as well try, right? Try calling the HR person or, that department. And when you do, having the vacancy number, if there's any kind of a number in the title of it, to just let them know you were just, calling to check on the status of the XYZ, whatever vacancy announcement. You had applied and you, are, very interested in the opportunity and just wanted to know where they are in the, hiring process, selection process. Have they begun to, interview clients or candidates, that type of thing. So that can, you can certainly reach out, right? Like that. But the other thing, one thing that you can do let's flip this a little bit and talk about it when you've had an interview and then it seemed to go well, and then it's just radio silence. There's nothing, right? There's just nothing that comes afterwards. And you're, wondering, maybe you reach out, nobody answers, nobody says anything, right? That is frustrating. One way you might be able to save yourself a little frustration is when you are in an interview. I always tend to ask at the end when they say, what questions do you have for us? One of the questions that I recommend people ask is something like, what is the projected, hiring, process for this job? What is the projected timeline for filling this position? And what are the next steps in the hiring process? And that way you can get from them, oh, well, there's a round 2 interviewing, and oh, it'll be a delay because our CEO's overseas and he needs to meet them, so it'll probably be more like whatever, right? So you might get some good information that helps you not to worry quite as much. So that can be that can be a couple of the things that I would say I would recommend. So okay. Let's move on and see. I don't see any questions in the chat box, so let's just move right on. Many times clients tell me that after doing their job search for a certain period of time, they just feel like there's nothing really else out there, in the field. It's like, I've just applied for everything and there's nothing that's out there. I don't know what to do, right? I can't apply for something if I don't, if there isn't anything out there. So, what do I need to do? So Sometimes the answer to that is that you might need to expand your search. Maybe there aren't as many opportunities in that area at the present time for some specific reason. Maybe people aren't going abroad because of COVID or things like that, right? So there might be opportunities where you do need to expand your search and have a new approach maybe to that. But I would definitely counsel you to tap into your network and find new people, like I was saying a little bit ago, with the whole finding people in, whether it's the affiliate groups, with NPCA, or LinkedIn is an amazing tool for meeting people, for connecting to other professionals who work in the area that you're interested in, that kind of thing. And remember, Peace Corps volunteers I would say just the general RPCV population is your biggest, one of, if not your biggest and strongest network of people who might be able to help you and who can just not only understand what you're going through, supporting, oh yeah, it stinks, I hated that, whatever, and who then are like, I'm going to help people when they come to me because, I want to make sure they don't go through what I went through, those kind of things. So you can find that oftentimes, right, on LinkedIn. Through doing, you can go in and do a search and you can say, do show all filters and then choose, people who, former company, Peace Corps, and you pick the one that's the official one with the official logo, and then current company, and then whatever that is. I don't know what your current organization that you're looking for is, but whatever it is, or the industry, putting that in there, that's going to narrow it down to either people who work or worked for Peace Corps and currently work at whatever organization or in that, certain sector, right? And you'd be amazed at how friendly people are in terms of willing to help people out. When you do approach them, try to, I would say not to ask for an informational interview. I don't like that. Informational interview just sounds very drawn out and long. And I just don't feel like it's as well received as career chat. So instead, if you were to say, hi, I'm currently doing a job search in the XYZ arena, and I'm looking to connect with people, hear a little more about their own background and experience, wondering if you might have 15-20 minutes of your time for a brief career chat to do that. People are, number one, they oftentimes feel like, wow, they want to talk to me. Oh, that's great. And secondly, easy to talk about themselves, right? It's nothing they have to prepare for. It's just, oh, well, what's your opinion of this? People love to give advice, right? So it can be a really easy way to expand your network, and specifically in the organizations that you're really trying to tap into, right? If you're looking for a specific organization, maybe you put in that, organization currently works at, or formerly works at, right, FHI 360 or USAID or whatever it is, right? So you can oftentimes find, really good contacts, through LinkedIn. But, start with and retap, like I said, your own network, because your own network, oftentimes we forget about what constitutes our own network, right? It's everything from our, Peace Corps friends and family, but it could be our university for undergrad or graduate school, right? It could be, religious organizations or civic organizations, your family, your extended family and people that they know, right? So there's lots of different things that help you to, your network is much bigger than you think it is. And it's bigger than what shows up on LinkedIn, right? Regardless, because that's separate and apart from many people who may not be, doing, LinkedIn or whatever and things like that. So but LinkedIn is here to stay. It's definitely the leading, platform for really connecting with professionally, right? So it's definitely one that you want to definitely check it out. If you haven't already done your profile, you can do a pretty simple type of profile. It allows you're more able to even use I have 16 plus years of specialized experience you can use the I, instead of, like in your resume, I'm always saying to people, targeted bullet, fragment bullet sentence, not sentences, it's bullets, but, fragment verbs, action verbs and, ED action verbs and things like that. Instead of, doing I served as, you would just say served as or selected to serve as, things like that. But the amount of people who are on LinkedIn is why it's so powerful and why it's so important. And it's grown exponentially in recent years. Right now, as you see, 849.6 million users. And what's really interesting about that is a couple years ago, when I was starting with the, helping evacuees and doing webinars and things like that, I remember looking up the stats on LinkedIn, and I had them in a slide deck. And at that time, it was 60 million is what showed up. And I was like, wow, 60 million to 849 million. That just shows you exponentially how LinkedIn works and how big it is, how huge it is. And it's not just here in the States, it's internationally as well. So if you're looking, for, contacts internationally as well, it's great. So I would definitely spend some time on that and make your profile. You can look at some examples. LinkedIn has some free courses on how to build your profile or how to strengthen your profile. Some of the little tips like, personalizing your LinkedIn address so it's not like your name plus all these weird digits. You can erase that and have, LinkedIn.com, / and, whatever with your name. Maybe if that's taken, then you might have to add 1, 2, 3 or whatever, something else. But you can have that. It's a lot easier for people to remember that than trying to, write when you're meeting people. So that's great and really helpful. And then I think sometimes, the problem when I talk to people is that they feel like they're a robot, right? I'm just completing these things. It's robotic. It's, on autopilot, if you will, right? And that's hard, right? If that's the case, I would definitely consider that you consider doing some kind of a resume revamp, because if you've been sending a resume out for a while and you're just not getting any bites on it, there's something that could be done to make that more compelling, right? And make it speak to the language that's in the job announcement, right? You want to use their same kinds of words. Don't plagiarize and use an entire list or whatever, but work in those things into your own statement. So you have those power words and those keywords that they're looking for really itemized. You might start, one thing I listed here, you might start your cover letter in more of a creative, way. Maybe it's a story, maybe you start, with, how you've been a lifetime fan of X, Y, whatever the company, because it's something you grew up on, or, whatever. You could certainly do that, right? Another thing for cover letters is you might include you might decide, if you have kind of a dense cover letter, you don't want a really dense one, right? You can have some bullets, that you can have bullets in there where it's I meet, or, whatever your qualifications in the following ways. And then, you could have some bullets if you wanted. But sometimes when you're explaining and you're going through it, it gets kind of dense when it gets close to a page. So sometimes I say to people, how about, if you really can't get it down a little more, how about bolding the action, the words and the phrases that they're looking for and that really describe you, right? So 10 plus years specialized experience in gender equality. I'm just using that as tonight's example, right? Whatever it is. And bolding those key things that are going to pop. Because honestly, when people look at your resume and at your cover letter, they're not reading it. Dear, I'm writing to apply. They're not reading the entire thing. They're scanning. So they're looking for. So that's why you want to keep it in kind of shorter paragraphs, that kind of thing. But if you use those keywords bulleted, that can really help. It can help make it easier for them. And yes, I'm a huge advocate of a cover letter, even though many people will say, oh, don't worry about it. It's your resume that's important. Obviously, if they ask for a cover letter and a resume, you need to do both. If they don't, you have the option of doing one or not. It may not hurt you, but it may be someone like me who definitely does put a lot of credence in whether somebody takes the time and effort to actually write a cover letter, and a good one. It allows me to see how they write, what their grammar's what they're right. So it definitely gives them an edge in my mind when I'm, recruiting for certain things. So if you have a deadline that's coming up the end of the day and there's no way you can get a quality cover letter done and it doesn't ask for it, well, then maybe you don't do it that time. But you can simplify the process by whenever you're doing a job, your next job you're applying for, look back at the job that was most similar to that job, and then look at how you can you can take that cover letter as a template, if you will, and then change it for the right the information and tailor it. But my point is the same with the resume. You don't have to start at ground zero and build an entire new resume. you can use the one in your past that is most similar, and an organization that's most similar, or an opportunity most similar to what you're seeking here, and then fine tune it from there, which can help save you a lot of time and hopefully a lot of frustration. Okay. So it's those kinds of tips, I think, that can really make a difference in, you know, in your in your job search, in, you know, getting that that application really well, you know, received and moved forward, right? So I'm happy to talk to any of you, as I said, about any of these tips. You can certainly reach me at jodi@rpcv.org. And at this point, if you do have any questions, I'm happy to just let you unmute and ask any particular questions you might have about your specific job search. So be my guest if you do have some. All right, I don't see any in here, so there might not be any, and that's just fine. But great. So if you do have other questions, please reach out to me, and good luck to you in your job applications. And I look forward to hearing where you land and to talking with you about your process if you do need any help. So thanks so much, and make it a great week.